Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here, with my next The Dawn of Yangchen chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 40, Honored Guests, the second last chapter of the book, and the last Yangchen chapter in the book. So this is a quite, it covers a lot of ground, this chapter. There's a few different sections to it, but fundamentally it is her arriving back at the Northern Air Temple. We get the reveal that she's been hiding the three combustion benders and Hansha there. And then we have more of a kind of internal kind of conflict for Yangchen as she kind of, in a way, sits down to rest and just considers, like, the amount of effort that I put in and things still aren't going, like, completely right. Should I just stop? And what is the thing that finally, in a way, like, brings her out of that kind of feeling? And I think the book for Yangchen ends on a pretty interesting note, that she's aware that she's going to have to continue to struggle on as the Avatar, because that's what it takes to get things done. It's always a challenge. It's never easy. But that she has to do it. So let's get into this one. There's a lot to sort of analyze and kind of pick through in this one. So we see that straight away it starts off like her hands are shaking in the aftermath of the meeting with the Earth King. Just because there's the idea where if that went wrong, if he didn't believe her and felt that she was lying, that could have caused some major, major issues. Thankfully it went well, but there's still the sense that there's a bit of a time limit on things. That the information about the combustion benders, the truth of what happened in Bin-Er, it's going to get out at some point, whether it be someone who knows the details telling someone, or just the nations investigating it and someone finding out about it. We get this interesting explanation of, like, the situation that Yangchen finds herself in, because the one thing that she wants above all else is that details of unanimity are not made public by anyone to anyone. And because of that, it limits what she can do in so many situations. She can't basically do anything to the other Shang cities other than Bin-Er, because the only way she can sort of get in there and in a way gain power, leverage over them, is to basically oust the Zongdus by making public unanimity. So that's what she has over Chai-Si, but she can't use that to take down Chai-Si. So it basically reveals here that Kavik had asked her in the previous chapter about what's going to happen to Chai-Si, what's going to happen to my brother, Kalyan. And so Yangchen just says, like, nothing. Because Yangchen can't do anything against them. One, because she doesn't really know where, like, Kalyan is. He's probably just hiding out, trying to stay away from Chai-Si and do whatever he's going to do next. He will be interesting to see where he goes going forward. But with Chai-Si, she can just go on as normal because she knows Yangchen cannot make public unanimity. And that's what we get here, is that Yangchen reveals she received a scroll from Chai-Si with just one line, and it was just a taunt. Wise move. And it's like it says here, Yangchen had no move, could make no move, and Chai-Si knew it. That's the situation here, is that Chai-Si has come out of this book in a very, very good position, ultimately. You might think that, oh wait, she lost unanimity, but the way that the tease has gone with unanimity is that there is clearly much more to that than meets the eye. She's the one masterminding the research on this, so she likely either has other combustion benders who will be ready shortly, or just others that no one else knows about. And these three were used as like a bit of a test run. Or she's happy to sit and wait, knowing that she can maybe get those three back in a way whenever she wants. So that's what makes Chai-Si so interesting going into the next book, is that for Yangchen to, you know, in a way get her, she either has to, in a way, secretly capture her in some way, or publicly out information about this incredibly dangerous thing in a volatile political world where Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, and Water Tribes all are not on great terms with each other. So, very, very interesting stuff. But anyway, she arrives at the Northern Air Temple here. And she lands and heads down and is met quite early on by Abbot Sonam, the leader of the Northern Air Temple. And he's pretty angry at her. He's kind of like, you have made jailers of us. And this is where we get the reveal that, okay, she has held the 3 combustion benders as well as Zongdu Hansha at the Northern Air Temple in secret. And this is all she could do. There's nowhere else pretty much that she could have hid them and it be, I suppose, as secret as she needs to be. The other nations respect the air nomads and so for the most part stay out of their business overall because they're not going to march in there because it would look terrible on a political scale for them to march into air temples to investigate. So this is what is giving her time, is that, okay, if she can hold them here, she has time to figure something out. But, of course, this is a pretty complicated situation. These are 3 very dangerous characters, and then, you know, one not particularly dangerous kind of Zongdu. So it's explained here that she meets Thapa first, and he has 6 of the most skilled and powerful airbenders at the Northern Air Temple, kind of in like a circle around him. He's just doing some gardening on the ground, and it's clear that he's relatively comfortable in the situation he's in. He isn't planning an escape anytime soon, but they're doing it just in case. And it is revealed that they're constantly alert around him, but it's because Kavik managed in his tailing of the 3 combustion benders to figure out basically what is the alert that a combustion bender is about to use their skill, and it's that Kavik had managed to observe Zhao Yun through a window during the tail. Before each explosion, they have to do a lot of deep, heavy breathing, and so all the airbenders are on alert for that about to happen. So that makes sense, and again, we get the idea. These combustion benders seem to be slightly inefficient. They need to do a lot of breaths compared to combustion bender Pali, who only seem to need to do 1, maybe 2, before they do a blast. So that's the one advantage that is had here, where even if they try to escape, they could take out maybe 1 or 2 of the airbenders, but there's always going to be, like, say, 4 they can't hit with their blast. So they've got them, you know, pinned down pretty well here at the temple. So we see Yangchen try to negotiate with Thapa here, but ultimately we get the idea that she's already tried to talk to him before, and they are completely aware. They are cunning and clever. They know what they're worth. They know that the information about their skills is one of the most valuable things that they actually have, and they're not telling anything about it. So we get the idea that these are not just like weapons. They are not just skills who happen to be people. That they are handling this situation in the best way for them. And that is that they are valuable, and that if they just wait here, something will go their way. Where like they'll find a chance to escape, or something will happen politically where they'll have to be freed in some way. They are perfectly fine to be here because ultimately they know they're safe being the quote-unquote prisoners of the Avatar. They're viewing this as a bit of a vacation. They get like looked after by the air nomads in this very peaceful society. They get to do all these relaxing activities, and they're going to be fine here for a while. Thapa says to her, you know, I do love gardening. Your brethren gave me some mountain flower seeds that do well in winter, but whether or not I get to see them bloom is another matter. How long are you planning to keep me here? And she says, it depends on how you answer my questions. And the ones that she has, she doesn't say them out loud, but in her head she's thinking, where did you learn this technique? Who taught it to you? What was Zongdu Chaisi's involvement? She had interrogated them, they weren't saying anything. And he just says, I still don't think I'm ready to share yet. I'm enjoying my little vacation here. So they were opportunists, is what Yangchen considers about them all. And it's revealed that they don't say anything about how their abilities work. All they're saying and confirming is that Hansha hired them to do whatever he wanted. They have no idea who this Chaisi person is. So she comes out of this pretty clean overall. So there's still a sense of they are loyal to her, but they're fine with Hansha going down for this ultimately. So Yangchen has no leverage over them. This is going to have to, they're going to wait it out. They were content to wait it out until the situation broke their way. The opportunity to escape would present itself. or someone would find out they were there and come for them. She couldn't keep them as hermits in the mountains forever, and they knew it. So they're players in this as well. Kind of teasing the idea that they're not just out of the game here, they'll come back into play in some way or another. Now, how can they escape? Obviously, if people do come in, if the Earth King marches in, or even any of the other nations march in, they can get them out that way. That will create enough chaos to where they'd be able to get out. Two, one thing I was thinking, the comet. If Sozhen's comet came, and there is one that likely comes in Yangchen's era, if you go backwards in time enough, covering the comet, which comes every 100 years, there is theoretically one that would come here. If it happened in like the next book, and this is how they escaped, it would basically set what age Yangchen is. We'd be able to figure that out. And I think it works to a certain degree, but I don't think ultimately that's what they're going to do. I think they're highlighting here the power of combustion bending on its own. They don't need to amplify that with the comet just to have these characters escape. I don't think they're going to do that, even though it's an explanation. But just keep your eye out for that, just in case something maybe goes in that direction. Because obviously we don't know much about what way the comet is perceived prior to Sozhen using it to start the war. And how well known is it of the amplification of firebending that it offers, and so on. So that's that. So Yangchen realizes that she's in a bad situation here, and she just thinks like, how long before I surrender? How long before I beg the White Lotus to take them in? That she really feels that, that's a last resort that she really doesn't want to take. But she would have to take that over letting Chaisi kind of get the advantage in all of this. And again, we covered the idea, information tended to spread. The Earth King would draw closer to these benders by the day, so would the Fire Lord and the High Chieftain. And she just has to leave at this point to be like, let me know, Thapa, if you change your mind about this. But then she goes to talk to Abbot Sonam again. And he's, again, very critical of her. You cannot keep them here that long. What you have done to your brothers is an abomination. She's like, I apologize. I had no choice. I apologize for forcing them such an abhorrent task into their hands. And he's like, no, Avatar. The problem is that they might enjoy the job too much, not that they have to do it in the first place. Holding dominion over another human being is a mighty temptation. If we developed a taste for such power, began to crave it, then we would no longer be air nomads. And so he's just kind of like, please, just go. That's an interesting point, that the air nomads in this era seem like they're in a very good spot. Like there doesn't seem to be many like internal problems necessarily, and it seems to be a generally good era where they are sort of free from most of the restrictions of like the Platinum Affair, so they have a good relationship with the other four nations, and that's what's helping Yangchen in this situation. And obviously he's frustrated by the fact that Yangchen is effectively putting the air nomads at risk by involving them as, holding key people like prisoner in an air temple. If they were to find out about that, it could lead to nations turning against the air nomads, which would be very, very bad. But the thing they're presenting here is more of this idea that the air nomads are not like in any way like corrupted or anything like that. There doesn't seem to be issues in this era for them. But this might be something that presents that idea of like, what if we could use our powers to hold like a more powerful role in the world, and maybe it's meant to set up like some of the ideas of some of the stuff that we see in like the Legend RPG game, when you go through the sections and you find out about like, oh, this is the problem for the air nomads in this era, here it is in this era, that this might form like a little bit of a splinter group for the air nomads. But who knows, we'll see what happens here. Maybe there's some sort of a thing where like the combustion benders begin to talk to some of the airbenders and convince them that like, hey, I could get you a lot of money if you let me go, or something like that. I'm not really sure about that, but it's an interesting kind of ominous line to a certain degree. Just I suppose highlighting in a way that like the air nomads can't be in a way like perfect forever. Something will happen that will cause issues. Then we have a chapter cut, and we go to Yangchen goes to talk to Honsha. And it's a very quick one. It's basically like a page and a little bit. And it's just the idea that he was furious when he was first brought here. Like really, really angry. Like we know from before. He's kind of like, why does it happen to me on my watch? Why couldn't being a Zongdu just work out nicely for me? I could have got in and out. But of course everything went wrong. And it's all Yangchen's fault. So she comes to see him. And interestingly, he starts off and he seems to have a little bit of an advantage in a way. And he's just like, I understand your situation too. How much time do you really think you have before the truth slips through your fingers and is loosed upon the world? He's aware that like the unanimity coming out would be a very bad thing as well. But Yangchen's just like, I have exactly as much as you do. So Yangchen is very aware that in the same way that she is going to be put in a terrible situation if unanimity kind of slips out to the public. But it also puts him in a bad situation because all of a sudden that means his involvement in it would become public. And he is kind of like, in a way, number one on the chopping block for the Earth King. The Earth King was going to want him dead because of what happened. Because he was the leader of this Shang city when what happened. He's going to want him got. So that's the problem with this, is that. He tries to bargain with Yangchen using the one thing that he has left. And he's like, I have a plant deep in Chai Si's organization, very high up. And he's obviously talking about Kalyan. But Yangchen knows about Kalyan because Kavik came clean to her. So she's just kind of like, don't want it. I don't want your information. And she just walks out and is kind of like, goodbye Zongdu until we next talk. And she again has a moment where she just leaves him absolutely furious and frustrated that he must absolutely hate Yangchen at this point. And because like she kind of is responsible for so much going wrong for him, that in the first place, her mentioning the Earth King is what in a way caused him to put this plan into action. And now here, his one out, she doesn't need his information. So, interesting. But still, he is still there. And I'm assuming we will at least get a little bit with him in the next book. I'm not sure what we're going to do, but because he's in such a bad position, it doesn't even feel like Yangchen can sort of like reintroduce him to the world, but like working for her, because he's basically going to be wanted by everyone. Because the idea we're going to learn quickly is that everyone who is known to have publicly been in Bin-Er when the attacks went down is wanted by the Fire Lord, the Water Tribe High Chief, and the Earth King, because they might have information about the truth about what happened here. So Honsha is one of them. And so there is an importance to this character in all of this as well. So we'll see how he gets utilized here. But for now, that is the end of him in this book, held at the Northern Air Temple. Then we get to the last section here, the last couple of pages of the chapter. So Yangchen goes off on her own. And instead of what she would usually do, it's explained here that usually when she goes to the temples, she always goes to the public like visitors' dormitories. She doesn't go to the set like avatar quarter that it seems like all the temples have. So, but this time she does decide to go there. She goes to the specific avatar's quarters. And it says here, she used them so rarely when she visited, preferring to stay in the visitors' dormitories with her sisters. So much so that she hadn't even exercised her right to decorate it yet. The interior remained in the exact same state Avatar Zito had left it. And so it's just noted that there's nothing in the room except for the bed and the desk. Nothing on the walls, anything like that. It's absolutely plain. And then we get an interesting moment, kind of like one of these Avatar memory moments for Yangchen. What a messy life that was. So that's very interesting in that the Zito era, obviously it's a complicated one because he had to do a lot to sort of in a way fix the Fire Nation and be a diplomat. But otherwise it seems like he's very respected and he ultimately accomplished a lot. So Yangchen reflecting on like Zito as like that being a messy life is very, very interesting. But the idea is that she sits down in the chair and squeezed her head between her hands, the grey fuzz back with vengeance. So this is where we get this moment of like Yangchen feeling like just tired about everything that has happened. The effort that she has put in to try and solve this problem, it's gotten to her because she's worked out a way to make this work out in her favor. But as this chapter has sort of explained, she's also in a way trapped in this kind of losing position that she's just waiting for the news to drop to all the other nations. She's waiting for the combustion benders to escape to a certain extent. Chai-Si has the advantage over her that she's done a certain amount that is very, very good, but the rest of it ultimately hasn't worked out. And so she just considers this idea of like, should I stop trying so hard? Should I stop trying to reshape the world? Should I just be like the White Lotus want me to be and become this less active avatar who just waits and reacts to whatever happens? Maybe she should stop, as well as having the ability to stop if she wanted to. And it's just noted here that she could stop trying to reshape the world. What had she been doing? Throwing herself headlong against suffering where she found it? Where had she not multiplied the people's miseries instead? She'd still be the avatar, the figurehead, an object of veneration you turn to, well after desperation had latched its hooks into your flesh. The problem addressed, not prevented, the salve, not the cure. So she's kind of thinking she would have an excuse as well. Because she's an air nomad avatar, she could just fully embrace negative Jing and retreat far, far away and just becoming a different sort of avatar altogether. That way she wouldn't hurt anyone with mistakes that she makes, but she also wouldn't save anyone either, is what it says here. And it says here, Yangchen was struck by how little the prospect weighed on her. She didn't feel guilty for considering the future lived over the future earned. She didn't feel much of anything. Her parade through Bin might as well have happened in another life, on the other side of a boundary marked by regret. And she's just kind of thinking like, you know, she could embrace that kind of just blank view on the world. She didn't owe anyone anything. And she kind of thinks like, oh, I'd have time to find Jetson in all of this. But just as she's in a way about to make a decision like that, of like, I'm gonna not be as active anymore, Abbot Sanam returns and is kind of like, oh, Avatar, there's something like I forgot to tell you actually. This one will be quite important actually. Do you remember the woman at the hospital that you helped? Remember you and your companion Kavik healed her, and then we found out that her son was missing. And she's thinking, because she's in such a low moment here, that he has come to basically say that like they found the boy's body and it didn't work out so well, that she saved one person only for one person to die. But instead she is told that no, we found her son. He's alive and well. The search party found him. That like it's all thanks to you and your companion. You saved someone. Avatar, you never gave up on her. Don't you remember? And it's kind of key there. The word remember for Yangchen is kind of important. Does she remember? Yes, she did. She always remembered. Her lip trembled and she began to weep. The abbot smiled, thinking happiness alone and pure had brought tears to her eyes. He didn't know that he dragged her back from the edge in shackles, sentenced her to another turn of the wheel. So she still has this ultimately quite like negative view on things. That this is like, this moment has given her that little bit more of a spark to keep going. But she is still aware of the fact that it is going to be this slog. That's how being the Avatar is in terms of trying to be effective. It is this thing that is in a way suffering. You know, Yangchen could pretend all she wanted, but it was no use. She would remain the instrument of her own suffering. She'd keep fighting, keep struggling, just like she'd commanded the unconscious woman to do in the hospital. It was her fate to make the same choice over and over again, as generations of avatars had done before her. To know the past was to know the future. So the abbot's like, they're still in town. Do you want to go and meet them? And she's like, tomorrow for now, let's slow things down, need to rest. So she turns in early. She had much to do. She would need her strength. High in her tower, Yangchen went to bed, and for once fell into a deep, dreamless, restful sleep. And that's meant to be sort of notable, that like Yangchen's sleeping is often like, in a way, almost a fearful thing for her, because she never knows if she's going to wake up and be in her own memories or not. But this time there's a sense of like, okay, she's sleeping because she knows there's a lot to do ahead of her. She's back in the game now, kind of ready to play, but aware it's going to be a challenge, a struggle all the way. But that's what you have to do as the Avatar. And this is defining of Yangchen. That's what this entire book, in a way, has been about. Yangchen puts in so much effort to try and make things happen. This is why the scene with Mama Yunarak was so important, and her being so, in a way, strong and clear about, this is why I am the way I am. I know from previous avatars that the way I'm doing things is better than the way you want me to do things, which is to hold back and wait. No, it's better to do it this way, even if it like grinds me down every day that I do it like this. And I like this because, in a way, it goes back to the Yangchen and Kyoshi scene from Shadow of Kyoshi, where Yangchen finally appears to Kyoshi. They have their conversation, and at the end, Yangchen says to Kyoshi, "Let this be my first piece of advice to you, Kyoshi. There's 1,000 generations of past lives in the Avatar cycle. You could spend 1,000 years talking to us, and you still wouldn't know how to best guide the world. That is what you must forego, Kyoshi, the easy answers. You must give up your desire for someone to tell you your choices were correct in the end." And Kyoshi doesn't initially understand, but like, okay. And I feel like there's a connection here to a certain degree. It's just that idea of there's no easier way to be the Avatar. Yangchen can't just communicate with the past lives and get the ultimate piece of advice and win the day. You have to struggle and accept your choices and go on. And that's what Yangchen takes here. And in a way, you can see why she delivers that piece of learning to Kyoshi as a past life. So, in that sense, like I like this chapter for Yangchen as a character, because they don't do, in a way, like the typical thing where it's just like, oh, you saved someone, and Yangchen's just like, so it was worth it in the end because I saved someone. It's just viewing it like, the abbot had brought her back in to suffer once again, another turn of the wheel. That's just enough to sort of re-energize her for the next one, but it's still that struggle. That's kind of, I think, key to all of this. That most avatars don't have like an easy time of it because they're never 100% super respected. That even Zito, and this is why I'm very interested to see about Zito, is that like we've only heard about him through legend and he was greatly respected, but I'd love to see, in a way, a younger Zito and how he got to be so respected. And obviously it's the same for Yangchen. She doesn't seem to be as well respected now, but goes on to be considered one of the legendary avatars, to the point where it's almost Zito's that is the one like bumped off the great avatar list in exchange for Yangchen. So that's an interesting one to consider. Otherwise, it's just like a lot of the pieces being put into position for probably the next book of like, Yangchen is holding the 4 key characters in the Bin-Er event captive at the Air Temple. Information is going to come out eventually, and she has to plan for how best to sort of handle the situation once it breaks down. What will she do? How will she figure it out? And sort of what is the immediate next goal? Because what she's going to want to do, I suppose, is what she's now going to be allowed to do with Bin-Er with the Earth King's help. She wants that same thing to happen to the other Shang cities. So obviously we know the Taku, the other Shang city we don't see here in this book, is going to come into play in some way in the next book. That's the only thing we know about it so far. I'm wondering, is that going to be like the centerpiece in a way? Like that Zongdu is actually surprisingly like involved in things or something like that. That could be key. Otherwise, it does feel like it probably is how do I take down Chicey in all of this? And it's just, how do I investigate and figure out what's going on with these combustion benders without the rest of the world knowing? And it makes me wonder how many of these characters will be front and center in the next book. Like, are we going to get more scenes with the Earth King, more scenes, like scenes full stop with the Fire Lord, with the Water Tribe Chief, and it's just going to be this worldwide like investigation into combustion bending? That could be very interesting to see where we go with it. But as a Yangchen character chapter, I really, really enjoyed this one in terms of how it wraps things up and leaves the dynamics with her and all the other leaders into the next book. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter, but that's been it. Thanks for watching, and bye.